Today, I would like to share a story with you. This is a story from my childhood. We lived on the 10 acres in a little town in Oklahoma, and we lived in the farmland. We had orchards, and we also, my father and my brothers would hunt for food. This was back in the 50s. So I would have been 5 years old. Some of you may have noticed from watching some of my videos that I have I don't know what you want to call it, I have a short finger on my left hand. My brother was going on 12 years old, so this would have been in the spring, approximately 1959, I'm thinking 1960, and I would have been, he would have turned 11, or possibly 12, and I would have been 5 years old, or I was turning 6, so I just don't remember exactly my age. I'm thinking I was 5 going on 6. This happened around Easter, and I'll have to tell you why I remember Easter. Anyway, my older half-brother Jack and my dad were going to go to the feed store, and Jack was always teasing my older brother Gerald, and he told him that he could not go to the feed store with him that day, that he had to stay home. So, as it goes, from what my mother was telling me, she was outside down toward the pond, and we had a little creek that ran through, and she would get fresh cold water to bring up to wash our clothing. And so she wasn't in the room, and the room was the log cabin. We did have, the A-frame was built a little bit later on, but in the log cabin area, there would have been Gerald and myself, my sister Linda, and one of our younger brothers, Ricky. Well, because my family hunted for food, we had he had a double-barrel shotgun, and it hung on the wall. Now, my brothers and my sister and I, we were always taught not to touch that. Well, because Gerald felt left out, he decided that he was going to get down the shotgun, and he was going to go hunting, which he wasn't supposed to be out hunting by himself. He was supposed to always be out with Jack or with our dad. So anyway, it was always loaded, and there was one cartridge. Thank goodness there wasn't a double cartridge. So I don't know, from what my mom said and from what Gerald said, is that I was just a stubborn little girl. And some reason I was close by, and I stuck my hand up over the barrel. And somehow my brother's finger slipped and it hit the trigger. And apparently the gunpowder also sprinkled on one of my brothers, Ricky, on his arm, but the gunpowder was through the door and into an oak tree that was standing outside there in the front area there. So here I am with a wound. My mom was coming around the side of the house at the time, or I should say the log cabin, and she had her cold water, and she come running in, and the first thing that she did was she grabbed me, and we had a water basin, and she poured some of the cold water in the water basin. Now, this is Clear Creek water, and she put my hand in the water basin. We didn't have a phone. And our only communication was there was a family who lived at the end of the road, about a half a mile down. Their last names were the Adams. And Mama sent Gerald down to get the family and have them to call for help. And they actually came up, and I was put in the car, and I was taken to the next little town. It's called Ardmore, because we lived in Lone Grove. And so they took me to Ardmore, and I remember being in the hospital, and they had, wrapped me up, cleaned my hand and everything and stuff, and my finger actually was just barely hanging on by a little bit of skin, and the knuckle and everything was missing. They couldn't do anything for me there, and so I was taken care of, and then I was put into an ambulance with my mama, and they were sending me up to Oklahoma City. Now, I remember this ride in the ambulance with my mom, and there was a nice man, and I just was a scared little girl, and he had red hair and freckles, and I remember this man. He gave me a little piece of juicy fruit gum. And I remember this gum. I remember the smell, the taste. And I chewed that gum all the way to Oklahoma City, which was approximately an hour and a half to 2 hours ride. I won't forget him. When I was in the hospital there in Oklahoma City, they did surgery. And I do remember being in a recovery room, or to me, it was just a big room, and there were other children. And I remember over to my right side, where my mother sat, there was another child, a little girl, and she had her arms and her legs in like cast, and they were like elevated up and had all these wires and contraptions and things. It was just something I remembered. I also remember that this was around Easter time. First time I had ever seen someone dressed up like an Easter bunny. And I do remember what that Easter bunny looked like also. They came into the room where all of us children were, and they gave us those little cute cups of carnation ice cream, the vanilla. And they also brought in a bag of the old-fashioned candy-coated Easter eggs. And I liked the yellows and the blues, and I had never had one. They were kind of like the little marshmallow inside them. And so we never had these kind of candies because we just didn't have that because we were very poor. So I do remember these candies, and there was a little girl that had a red one. And she had it like, that candy was like all around her mouth. And the nurses told us, said, don't tell the doctor that we gave you guys candy. And this little girl, just smiling all pretty and everything, and here comes the doctor. It was just something that made an impression on me. It was candy. And that ice cream was totally delicious. So anyway, after I recovered and was able to go back home, they had made a couple of appointments, and I was taken back to Oklahoma City, and they were going to do surgery and take a bone out of my left foot, and they were going to add a bone, because this is my little 5-year-old finger. So they would have added a bone, and everything was all sewed up and reattached and everything. And the actual only movement I have is to do this. I cannot bend it or anything like that. I do remember that when I had to go back to the hospital, for some reason the surgeries were canceled. And after the second trip up there, my dad refused to let me go back up again. And they just let it go. I had a brace that was under my arm and my hand, and there was a wire that went through my finger just below the end of my fingertip there. And there was like a little steel bar or wire, and it came out, and rubber bands, and it was connected, and that was to keep my finger straight. And I do remember for many, many, many years, even up into my young adulthood, I could have pain in that finger, and I remembered that pain. But when I went to school, I did wear, that in the fall, I did wear my brace. So I'm assuming I was 5 going on 6, because I was 6 in May. So anyway, most of the time, my hands are just my fingers together, but when I do some things, my finger it is more noticeable and everything. In high school, I was in typing class and I made straight A's. And believe it or not, I could type more words per minute than any student in my classroom when I was in high school there. And I was good because this finger was nice and long. It did double work, and I could hit those keys, honey. I mean, they were just, I could hit my keys. I could type fast. I was good at it. Anyway, it's never really held me up, or it's never been, you know, any problem when I've done things like working with woodwork or just the normal everyday life. I don't feel like there's any disability at all, although it is considered a disability, I guess. But I can do anything and everything. I've worked with jewelry. I have done a lot of toe painting and things like that and everything. And I don't ever have any issues with it. I still don't in a normal everyday life. Just remember that if you do have a gun, please make sure that there's no cartridges, there's no shells. Make sure they're locked up in a gun case. Make sure that your guns are all put away and everything, because accidents do happen. My brother was a very innocent boy. He just didn't know better, although we had been taught not to do this, but because he wanted to do something, he made a mistake. And I think we've only talked about it a couple of times, because when we brought it up, he would turn and I could see his eyes water up. And I know he remembers that spanking that he got, and I know he remembers what happened. So there's no reason for us to ever really talk about it. It's over, it's done. There's no blame or anything like that. My mother or my father never blamed him or anything. He did learn a lot that day. And so we lost our older brother Jack this past June, and he actually has the shotgun in his home, and it's under lock and key. It had a little bit of a history behind it. My dad had actually found it leaning up against a fence post out in the fields when he would go out, and it was brand new, and he picked it up, and he like, must be something wrong with it if somebody left a brand new double barrel just leaning against the fence. Well, he found out because it ended up knocking him down on the ground, and then he, you know, had it repaired. Down the line, he actually had tried to hit a wild pig that came onto our property that was out by the pond, and he swung it at the pig. It was wild and it was mean, and didn't kill it or hurt it or anything like that, but he did break the butt on the end of it, and to this day I do believe that it has some wire wrapped around it. I should be getting that double barrel back to me this year, and so it will be securely put away. But anyway, the fun part of all of this is I got a hidden stash. I've got all my gum in there, and there's nothing better than the smell of juicy fruit gum. Memories from the past. Good. When I rode in the ambulance, and that nice man with the red hair and freckles gave me his piece of juicy fruit gum to a scared little girl. Anyway, catch me on another video, and I will tell you about some more scars on my hands and my arms. If you'd like to follow me, just hit the little thumbs up after you subscribe, share with family and friends. You're welcome to make a comment, and remember, safety comes first. Have a wonderful day.